We're talking about the ATF gun walking operations. Was going to do specifically on Operation Fast and Furious, but just too much to talk about because they were doing it before. There were some other agents killed. But for starters, we're going to get into what this is all about. Don't really know what gun walking is. So at the start of this whole thing, many Americans felt that the ATF was focusing on small-time gun crimes instead of trying to find the major traffickers. So basically, gun trafficking isn't really clearly defined in U.S. law, but it basically entails that you're buying guns and diverting them to people who are using them illegally. It's essentially what they say that they're trying to do, but we'll get into it. I feel like it was something very different. So straw purchasing. It's not technically illegal in itself, but lying on the gun form is. It's federal crime. It gets you locked away for a long time, but not that long, as we'll get into. All right, so there's like two major things that the ATF, there's two major laws in the U.S. That one was passed in 1934, that's the National Firearms Act, that regulates machine guns and other specific firearms. So it's gets really niche. I'm pretty sure it's machine guns and SBRs. Then there's the Gun Control Act that was passed in 1968, which governs the sales and who can own firearms. So felons and, prohibited possessors, they can't own firearms. So if you beat your wife one night because she didn't cook dinner for you, well, nah, you can't own a gun, buddy. Which, don't beat your wife. That'd be messed up. Laws target straw purchasing, gun smuggling, and firearm use in violent crimes. An example, a Texas gun trafficking ringleader was sentenced to 7 years in prison. I don't know. I guess that's one job. ATF agents have previously used controversial tactics called gun walking. So basically, they're letting illegal firearm sales happen to track the criminals, which I just don't think works very, very well. So let's say I purchase a gun, I sell it to whoever, this guy. Well, I'm pretty sure he works for somebody else who's also going to distribute those guns to other people that you're not going to know. You can't follow everybody. That's why this whole thing was a big, huge failure. All right. So the Fast and Furious operation under Project Gunrunner took this a step further, allowing guns to walk without proper tracking. Smart, right? I know the ATF is full of a whole bunch of very, very bright people. Many ATF agents oppose this tactic, saying it would violate their training, which is true. It kind of is dumb, but we'll get into what I feel like the real reason is behind this. I can't prove it, but I think there's enough evidence to back it. All right, so in October of 2009, the DOJ, the ATF, the DEA, and the FBI, and federal prosecutors met to discuss a strategy against Mexican cartels, which is essentially this. The goal to take down the entire gun trafficking network, not just small-time buyers, but just doesn't really make sense because, let's say your target is for Mexican cartels, like drug cartels. Well, you let a guy buy, let's say, 1,000 guns from just local gun shops where this was taking place was in Arizona, very, very close to the border. Well, that guy sells it to another guy, and that other guy just drives over the border. Well, guess what? Now you don't have jurisdiction over there. It's really stupid. So ATF's Phoenix field office took this as a green light to let guns be trafficked. Smart. All right, so how did they execute this plan? Instead of arresting suspicious buyers immediately, agents monitored gun sales in hopes of catching bigger players. So basically they were like, that guy just bought guns. Let's go look at the paperwork on that instead of following him. So stupid. Key details. The first track purchase happened October 31st of 2009. The operation's name came from the Fast and Furious movies because the bigger group of these people were operating out of a car tuning shop and they would street race. So just slap Fast and Furious on it. Their names are so interesting. So over 600 firearms were purchased by that one group, the Fast and Furious group. Unlike a previous ATF program, Operation Wide Receiver, Operation Fast and Furious had no coordination with gun dealers or Mexican authorities. All right, I'm going to give you some statistics. By 2010, so this may be 9 months later, 1,600 guns were trafficked. $1 million in guns were bought, all by straw purchasers. A lot of these weapons turned up at crime scenes in both the US and Mexico. So there's huge backlash over this. I mean, you got to think 1,600 guns. I think one other thing said that it was 2,000 guns ended up being bought. which is wild. Gun store owners raised concerns about frequent straw purchasers, because it's pretty easy to tell who's straw purchasing. He goes in there and buys 20 guns, all 20 long guns. Get out of here. You don't need that many guns. I mean, I walked up and I bought a pistol and an AR. I didn't get flagged. It's pretty easy just to like buy a gun to go and shoot. But these obviously is not what these people were doing. So the ATF agents in the Phoenix field office actually did want to make some arrests. So I will give it to these guys, John Dotson, amongst other agents. They were trying to stop this whole thing because they just like, this isn't going to work. But they were blocked by, you know, bigger ATF agents, big wigs. Like I mentioned previously, once all this started coming out, John Dotson, that was one of the ATF field agents that wanted to arrest these people. He blew the old grape whistle, if you know what I mean. He was being assaulted. Just kidding. But he blew the whistle, exposing the operation to Congress. Now, why did he do that? Well, because it all kind of started unfolding when Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, also former U.S. Marine, he was killed in December of 2011 in a shootout near the Arizona-Mexico border. 2 AK-47s were found that were directly linked to Operation Fast and Furious. But the bullet that killed him was pretty mangled, and they couldn't really definitively tell if it came from one of those firearms. But, you know, wrong place, wrong time. Now, Brian Terry's death is going to be directly linked to Operation Fast and Furious. So by September of 2011, Fast and Furious guns were tied to over 170 crime scenes around Mexico. Some were used in an attack on Mexican federal police helicopters, which I'm pretty sure they took one of those helicopters down. I don't think it was directly linked to guns that came from gun dealers in the US, because there was a specific gun that they found in one of the cartel members' house that I don't necessarily think that you can buy, but there was, you know, Fast and Furious guns, pretty sure. A cartel shootout that killed Mexican beauty queen Maria Flores Gamet, and one of them was in El Chapo's hideout in 2016 when he was captured. So these guns got all the way back to El Chapo. Those guns were whores. They were little sluts. They were getting around, you know what I mean? All right, now let's get into what the title was, what the thumbnail was. The political fallout that happened at the end of all of this. There was a 2011 whistleblowers contacted Senator Chuck Grassley, triggering investigations. The DOJ initially denied the ATF allowed guns to be trafficked and later backtracked. Attorney General Eric Holder faced scrutiny. That was the guy on the thumbnail, because he was like kind of like the biggest shithead in this whole thing. Congress accused him of covering up details directly related to Operation Fast and Furious. He became the first sitting cabinet member to be held in contempt of Congress. And then, so President Obama invoked executive privilege to withhold documents, which I think was later overturned, and Congress found that he couldn't actually do that. And then Eric Holder resigned, and then Obama left office. Obviously, because I think Trump was getting in office. Only 710 guns out of the 2,000 have been recovered. Most guns ended up with violent cartels. The Department of Justice admitted the operation was a failure. Pretty well known. Was this a failed strategy or deeper? Did the government sacrifice safety to go after big fish? What are the lessons to be learned to prevent this from happening again? So I'm just going to talk real quick about what I think this was actually about. I think this was Obama's ploy to get the AR-15 ban.